How about now? Better. All right, great. Hey, welcome everybody. We're going to be here to talk a little bit about generative AI today. Actually, not diving so much into the reasons why you might use generative AI, but we're going to be talking about trusting and validating the content that you might be using with all these exciting new technologies. First, a couple of introductions. I'm Mark Eliason. I'm a senior learning consultant with our AWS Enterprise Skills Transformation team. Basically, I get to go out and help our customers build internal learning programs, build communities of champions and cloud advocates. I'm also here partnering up with Barbara. Do you want to introduce yourself, Barb?
I'm a technical curriculum developer with AWS Training and Certification.
There you go. So we're actually going to be talking about what brought us together today. In fact, just a little bit of a side to that. As part of the role that I've got in our EST team, I was actually recently helping a really huge financial services organization build a train the trainer program around Amazon Q Developer, brand new technology. And at the time we were building this, there was really not a whole lot of training type content available. So I needed to build something quickly and efficiently, and I didn't really have a lot of time. But here's the problem. There is actually a lot of really great content and knowledge out there around generative AI. It just wasn't the stuff that I needed from a training perspective. That's when I actually started thinking about, is there a way for me to also use generative AI to help us do things faster, to help us do things better, also to make things more repeatable in time. And that's actually where I found Barbara, because she's actually been super involved with that stuff. We're going to be hearing about the exciting things that Training and Certification is actually using generative AI for in a little bit. But yeah, just to set the stage here, I'm going to talk a little bit about how difficult it is to keep up with the rapid pace of change, and also talk about the reasons why generative AI is so powerful in that space. And then Barb's going to kind of take us the rest of the way and talk about some of the methodologies that we're putting in place to make sure that when we're building content for you, what we are actually trying to generate is really hitting a high quality bar from the start. By the way, we're not going to probably take questions like in a live format, but if anybody does have questions afterwards, we'll just hang back to the side, come grab us. So let's talk about some of the challenges that we've got. Rapid innovation is a good thing. We don't have to argue that, but it also does present some challenges, because trying to keep up with the pace of rapid change is difficult, especially when we're trying to create learning content for a lot of different organizations. Now, AWS is a perfect example of this. When you think back to when we started in 2011, the number of services and features that we've released year over year, it's almost 4,200% growth in that time. And this does not even include all of the features, all of the services that we're announcing just this week alone. Keeping up with that change is difficult. In Training and Certification, where both Barbara and I live, we also have this good problem, where we've got over 600 different types of digital and learning experiences in the classroom. We've got well over 1,000 different types of builder labs and growing every day. This is a lot of stuff to try to navigate and find as a learner. And if we also just think about the sheer volume of information that's out there in the world, 45 billion publicly indexed web pages, and this doesn't include your internal intranets. This does not include the things that aren't indexed on the public internet. Navigating your way through all this stuff is a challenge, and trying to keep up with that pace of change is also a challenge. This is actually where generative AI becomes such an asset to us. But I also want to make it clear that generative AI is not the perfect solution for everything, and it's not like this magical tool that's going to fix everything for you. In fact, sometimes generative AI is not the right tool for your job. It is just an asset to have in that tool chest. Sometimes you might just need machine learning. Sometimes you may not need machine learning at all, and you just need to write a script. So when you're thinking about generative AI as kind of that new hotness, it is great, but it's not the solution to everything. There's another thing that people often don't realize with generative AI, and it's that you can have the most perfectly crafted prompt. You can have the most robust foundation model or large language model, and you can ask the exact same question twice and get slightly different answers. That's the premise of being non-deterministic. So if you need something that guarantees results time and time again, generative AI may not be the solution for that. And as a side note too, Gartner, I'm sure you're all familiar, there's research out there that shows just because you're using AI in a project doesn't guarantee success either. So I don't want to scare you away from this, because generative AI, while it may not always be the right solution for everything, it is transformative. It helps unlock possibilities that didn't exist anymore. Our AWS customers also realizing those benefits, whether it's Folks at the Lonely Planet, taking all those years of travel recommendations, putting that at your fingertips in seconds. We're talking about tremendous productivity gains through the New York Stock Exchange, or even saving almost $1 billion in healthcare and pharmaceutical discovery at Pfizer. This is really transformative and unlocking a lot of possibilities for us. But I still want to make sure we're talking about validating and trusting our content. This is actually why scoring content matters so much, because it's not enough just to ask a question and be good with it. As Barbara and I were getting ready for this presentation, we started talking about just the essence of measuring things. And I actually come from an organizational management background in university. We started talking about what is often talked about in business schools, this quote, "If you can't measure it, you can't manage it." I actually wanted to attribute that for this presentation, so I used Bedrock and said, hey, who said this? Where did it come from? I actually got a reasonably good answer. Peter Drucker, kind of one of the godfathers of management studies, he said, yeah, this in this book. Wasn't the exact quote, but it was close. But since I wanted to give you the actual page number this existed on, I asked another question. And this is where that non-deterministic piece fits in. What I found out is, guess what? Peter Drucker never actually said that exactly. It's not printed on any page in the books that he's written. And this is why scoring and validating content is so important. It's very easy to start passing off what might seem like a reasonable answer, and it's not exactly accurate. And that can have a lot of downstream effects. So this is why scoring matters so much. And I also want to underscore that as we're talking about artificial intelligence, subject matter expertise in the Gen AI world still matters a ton. Human essentials, or human intelligence, is still essential in this process. So as you're thinking about validating content, you want to make sure that you still have subject matter experts in the room, validating the outputs from those large language models. We also want to still give a bit of a nod of the head here to Peter Drucker too. You can try to manage things that you're not actually measuring, but why would you actually do that? Especially when you're dealing with mission critical systems. Suppose you're actually trying to generate documentation for a very heavily regulated industry, or where there's literally lives on the line. You're going to want to make sure that you're really measuring that type of content and validating it. The last two pieces before we actually get into the scoring methodologies that we're going to be talking about a bit. Scoring itself introduces discipline and a repeatable process, and that in and of itself is a win. That is also something that really helps you deal with that non-deterministic nature of generative AI. Building that repeatable process helps you create repeatable results over time. And the last bit too is really just kind of coming back to that human factor. When we're thinking about how are we defining quality and what good looks like, if you've got two different people working together on a project, you need to be on the same page about what is your expected quality threshold. So that process of just having conversations about what quality means and what good looks like is just as important as having that repeatable process and getting good outputs in the end. So really so far, we've just kind of set the stage for understanding that keeping with the pace of innovation is tough. There's a lot of really great examples of customers thriving with generative AI, but there is still that really important and essential element. We are still putting experts in the room with those generative AI outputs. And now we're also going to talk about the processes and some of the automations that we're building in TNC to help make sure that the content we build for you is really hitting that quality bar right from the start. With that, I'll turn it over to Barb.
Hey, thank you. Thanks, Mark. Okay. So, good evening. I'm Barbara Ristow. I'm a technical curriculum developer at AWS Training and Certification. We've been experimenting with generative AI to produce training content for a little over a year, and scoring has become an essential part of our solution. Today, I'm going to share with you the best practices and lessons learned along the way. There are 4 key milestones in our journey. First, we had to define what good was. We then had to integrate scoring into our processes so we could measure content and adapt our prompt templates and our data. We then created tools to automate and scale. And finally, we designed feedback loops so that we can calibrate and improve our solution. Our journey started with a small group of individuals from very different teams. Some team members produce digital content, online courses that you can take on Skill Builder, the AWS Learning Platform. Others produced instructor-led content, which is typically a multi-day immersive learning experience. These are very different types of learning assets with very different types of content structure and very different development cycles. So when we started to test prompts and evaluate outputs, we quickly discovered that we lacked a common understanding of what constitutes good content. So together we came up with 4 criteria. Correct. We produce technical content. If it's technically inaccurate, we have a problem. Compliant. Does the content follow our legal, style, and branding guidelines? Complete. Is it properly structured? Does the content meet its learning objective? And consistent. Does the content align with our overall portfolio? We call these the 4 C's. But these are criteria, and criteria is not yet a metric. In order to make it a metric, you need a measuring stick. So we came up with a measuring stick based on the number of adjustments required to fix the content, to get it to a publish-ready state. Using a scale of 1 to 5, we asked the question, how usable is the content? A 1 is not usable at all, a 2 is not likely to be usable, and on the other end, a 5 is usable as is, 4 needs a few tweaks, and 3 needs some multiple adjustments, but it's still usable. Our next step was to develop tools to automate and scale. We created a front-end application. We call it the Workbench. It's a place to innovate and experiment with generative AI. And for many of our content builders, this Gen AI Workbench has become their go-to place for their day-to-day work of content writing. It offers the ability to access prompts from a prompt catalog, the ability to adapt those prompts using variables. It also allows multi-model comparison using Amazon Bedrock. And finally, it offers content scoring using our, you can get your content evaluated using our proprietary scoring service. On the back end, our data science team developed a scoring service based on the 4C criteria. Here's how it works. The prompt and response is sent to the scoring service via API. Then, a panel of LLMs evaluates that content. A judge LLM synthesizes those evaluations and comes up with a final score and a rationale. And that final score and rationale is sent back to our Gen AI Workbench. The final stage is to create effective feedback loops. Our content writers have to work under tight deadlines. They need to fix the content quickly. They increasingly use our Gen AI Workbench to access or design a prompt, to do a quick rewrite, and also the scoring rationale highlights defects, and in some cases it may suggest alternatives. But remediation alone does not close the feedback loop. We're implementing mechanisms to capture user feedback on the score itself. That information gets passed back to our data science team so that they can calibrate and improve their solution. And by closing the loop, we've created a continuous feedback mechanism. Let's take a quick look at an example. One of the challenges that we're addressing with generative AI is compliance with the AWS Style Guide. And the word allow is a common issue that's coming up. According to our Style Guide, you should only use allow when referring to permissions, such as setting up a security group. We caution against using allow when referring to people, because we don't dictate what you're allowed to do. You're free to make your own choices. The challenge is that our style guide has hundreds of terms with similar usage guidelines that depend on context. And fixing them one at a time may work, but it's very inefficient. In a recent review, we had a piece of content that had 33 compliance style guide incorrect usages. Of those 33, 7 were the term allow. And we experimented with generative AI to come up with a prompt to remove all occurrences of the improper usage of allow, and that reduces the defects by about 20%. But it's really inefficient because we have hundreds of terms like this. And if we apply this approach for other terms, there's a high probability that we'll reintroduce the word allow. So we modified our prompt. And what we did was, instead of addressing the terms one at a time, we found the subset, the top 7, that were the frequent occurrences of improper usage. And in this situation, we didn't completely eliminate incorrect usage of allow, but what we did do was we achieved a 40% reduction in overall defects. So a key takeaway here is that you don't need to achieve perfection to realize significant productivity gains from generative AI. We're seeing significant gains from scores of 4s. And it's easier to fix content than it is to create it from scratch. Using this approach, we believe that we can reduce development time by up to 75%. We're also having more meaningful conversations around content quality. We're diving deeper into the whys, analyzing what makes content effective, what areas need improvement. This is making better use of our experts' time. And importantly, everything that I've described here today, including our proprietary scoring service, is powered by large language models alone. We have not customized or trained a model at this stage. If we choose to go down that path in the future, we will now be well informed to make data-driven decisions on those investments. My final advice, just get started. As you embark on your generative AI journey, keep these points in mind. Embrace experimentation. It's an ongoing process, not just by one individual, but by your entire team. The more distributed your experimentation efforts, especially with prompt engineering, the more likely you are going to unlock innovative solutions. Use scoring to drive meaningful discussions and align with your peers on what really matters. Scoring helps you measure the small steps along the way that lead to breakthroughs. And finally, beware of the magical thinking around generative AI. It will not deliver consistent results overnight. Progress takes time. Celebrate the small wins along the way, and they will eventually lead to a big leap forward. Thank you.
Thanks so much for being here. Enjoy the rest of the week. Have some fun and learn as much as you can about generative AI too.